I can still see that morning as if it happened yesterday, the instant when my entire world collapsed. If anyone had told me that just a handful of words could shatter a heart, I would have laughed in disbelief. Yet I learned the truth when the man I loved most walked out the door, leaving me alone with our newborn twins. Once I truly believed that love could withstand anything, that as long as we stood side by side, nothing could pull us apart. But I was naive. Love, I discovered, isn't always strong enough to survive greed, ambition, and the poisonous grip of a woman who dared to call herself a mother. That was the day I realized the painful truth. My children and I had never really belonged in his world. I first met Daniel on a crisp autumn afternoon, when golden leaves swirled along the narrow streets of New York. At the time, I was a young interior designer, newly arrived in the city with nothing but dreams and a fresh college degree. As for Daniel Montgomery, I had no idea then that he was the heir to Montgomery & Co., a powerful real estate dynasty that owned luxury properties from Manhattan to Los Angeles. To me, he was just a man with an easy smile and piercing blue eyes that lit up whenever they met mine, not someone weighed down by the expectations of an empire. We fell for each other quickly, the way young couples often do, swept up in passion and hope. Daniel never flaunted his wealth. He wasn't arrogant or distant, as I had always imagined men of privilege to be. Instead, he was tender, grounded, and made me feel as though I was the only soul who mattered in his vast world. Those early months together were the happiest I had ever known. I loved him completely, never realizing that love alone could not withstand the crushing weight of the Montgomery legacy. When I discovered I was pregnant, Daniel's joy was unshakable. He held me tightly, whispering promises to protect me and our child forever. But his devotion was no match for his mother, Margaret Montgomery, a woman whose cold gray eyes seemed carved from stone. I met her for the first time just a week after Daniel learned he would be a father. She invited us to a grand gathering at the Montgomery estate, a mansion glittering with crystal chandeliers and priceless art. From the moment I stepped inside, I knew I didn't belong. The women in their jeweled gowns looked me over with disdain. The men, powerful business partners, barely noticed me at all. At the center of it all sat Margaret, poised with a glass of red wine in hand. She offered me a smile, polite, polished, and entirely false. Her gaze swept over me like a verdict already delivered. "Daniel tells me you're pregnant," she remarked coolly, her tone devoid of warmth. How unexpected. I gripped Daniel's hand, feeling the tension in his body. He forced a weak smile, desperate to keep the evening civil, but I could see the unease in his eyes. Margaret said little more that night. Yet her silence carried the weight of a storm gathering on the horizon, and I was right to be afraid. In the weeks that followed, Daniel began to change. He grew distant, sleepless, constantly retreating to hushed phone calls with his mother. Each time I asked, he insisted everything was fine. But the uneasiness in me grew heavier by the day. By the time I gave birth to our twins, I knew something was broken. He was there in the hospital, smiling as he held our babies, but an invisible wall separated us. Then, one morning, the truth finally came. Daniel walked into our apartment with hollow eyes and shoulders bent under an invisible weight. I was rocking our infants, smiling with hope for our future. But that smile died the moment I saw his face. "We need to talk," he whispered. I placed the babies in their crib, my heart thundering. "What's wrong, Daniel?" He couldn't meet my eyes. His voice trembled. "I can't do this anymore. I have to leave." The air turned to ice. My world cracked open. "Leave," I whispered. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, and when he finally spoke, the words cut deeper than any blade. "My mother was right. We don't belong in the same world. I can't stay." Tears blurred my vision as my body shook. "You're leaving us? Leaving your children because she told you to?" He said nothing, and in that silence, I understood. The man I loved no longer stood before me. In his place was a puppet bound to his mother's will, willing to trade his family for the security of his inheritance. He turned away, his back to me. "I'm sorry," he murmured, though he didn't dare look back. The door slammed shut, and with it, he was gone, leaving me with nothing but 2 newborns and a broken heart. 4 days afterward, I sat staring at that door, half expecting it to open, praying he'd return and tell me it was all a cruel mistake. But reality was merciless. In our small apartment, it was just me and my babies. Unaware of the devastating loss I carried, the first weeks were the darkest of my life. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My body ached from childbirth, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the torment of abandonment. Nights were endless, filled with the echo of my children's cries and the sound of my muffled sobs. I barely recognized myself anymore. Friends called, worried, but I couldn't bear to answer. What could I possibly say? That the man who promised me forever had left me alone with 2 helpless infants. That love, in the end, had been nothing but empty words. But one night, as rain tapped against the window, a truth I could no longer ignore finally struck me. My children needed me. I couldn't drown in despair forever. If I collapsed, who would hold them when they were sick? Who would give them the warmth their father had denied them? I wiped my tears and told myself I had to rise. The next morning, I began searching for work, but life was merciless. Before my pregnancy, I'd been employed at a small interior design firm in Manhattan. When I tried to return, my position was already filled. No company wanted to hire a single mother with newborns. Some were blunt, saying outright that I wouldn't be reliable. Others offered polite excuses. Either way, rejection after rejection cut deeper than the last. Still, I couldn't stop. I had no choice. I tightened our budget to the bare minimum and survived on the little we had. I searched endlessly, often rocking my babies in one arm while scrolling through job postings with the other. Sleepless nights continued, but not from grief anymore this time. It was my children waking in turns through the night. Eventually, after weeks of desperation, I found a small freelance opportunity in interior design. The pay was modest, but it kept food on our table. Night after night, I worked by the dim glow of my laptop, the room silent except for the sound of my children breathing softly in their sleep. The months that followed tested every ounce of strength I had. I was a mother, a provider, and a survivor. There were moments when exhaustion nearly broke me, but I refused to give in. Little by little, the pain inside me dulled, not gone, but no longer ruling my life. I was no longer the woman sobbing alone in the dark. I was the mother of 2 beautiful children, and I would not let life crush me. The future remained uncertain, but one truth became clear. This time, no one, not Daniel, not Margaret, not fate itself, would decide my destiny. I often found myself sitting in front of my computer, the pale blue glow casting faint shadows across my tired face. Freelance interior design barely covered our bills, and deep down I knew I couldn't keep living this way. I needed more, something bigger, something that truly belonged to me. The idea arrived one late afternoon while I was folding clothes for my twins. I noticed how most children's clothing on the market looked exactly alike, nothing special. The stylish ones were ridiculously overpriced, while the affordable pieces fell apart after a few washes. That's when I thought, why not create clothes that are both beautiful and comfortable for kids? I wasn't a fashion designer, but I had always loved creating things. As a child, my mother had taught me to sew tiny dresses for my dolls. She was gone now, yet her lessons had never left me, so I decided to take the leap. I borrowed an old sewing machine from my downstairs neighbor and started with the simplest pieces: soft newborn onesies, stretchy leggings, and little dresses for baby girls. At first, I only made outfits for my twins, but when I posted photos online, friends began asking where they could buy them. That was the moment I realized I had a chance. I didn't have much money, but I had determination. Every spare dollar I earned went into fabric and supplies. I practiced sewing until my designs became more refined, teaching myself not only the craft but also how to run an online business. Still, the beginning was rough. My listings sat untouched, my emails to bloggers went unanswered, and the few orders I received often got canceled. Each rejection chipped away at me until I wondered if I was just wasting my time. But one night, as I watched my babies sleep peacefully in the outfits I had made, I knew I couldn't give up. I had come too far, so I tried again, this time smarter. I took professional photos, built a small website, and began a blog about my journey as a single mother starting a brand from scratch. I joined parenting groups online, sharing my story while gently introducing my products. Slowly, orders began to appear. My very first customer was a young mom from Chicago who bought a newborn outfit for her baby girl. When the payment notification appeared, I burst into tears, not from the money, but because it proved I wasn't hopeless. More orders followed. Messages poured in from mothers thanking me, some even sending photos of their babies glowing in my designs. I named my brand Little Blessings because that's exactly what my twins had given me, a reason to keep going. The following months were grueling. I worked day and night caring for my children, sewing clothes, packing orders, and running my website. My tiny apartment turned into a workshop, fabric stacked high and spools of thread scattered everywhere. Mornings were spent answering emails, afternoons cutting fabric during nap time, and nights learning marketing and brand development. Exhausting as it was, I had never felt more alive. Then came the turning point. One of my posts went viral after a well-known mom influencer praised Little Blessings. Overnight, my inbox flooded with messages, and orders skyrocketed. I was stunned. A friend had to help me pack shipments because I couldn't keep up. Soon, I partnered with a local workshop to produce my most popular designs. In just 6 months, Little Blessings grew from a small online shop into a recognized name in children's fashion. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building a future for my family. For the first time in years, I felt proud. One evening, while preparing orders, an email arrived from a major mother and baby retail chain in New York. They wanted to collaborate. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. This was the kind of opportunity I had never even dared to dream about. Looking at my sleeping twins, my heart swelled with gratitude. I had lost so much, yet in rebuilding, I had found myself. I thought back to the woman I once was, abandoned in a cramped apartment, crying behind closed doors. That woman no longer existed. Today, I stood strong, running a thriving children's fashion brand. Every morning in my spacious apartment, watching my kids giggle and run freely, I knew I was on the right path. No more sleepless nights, worrying about milk money, no more counting coins. Instead, I could provide stability, think about the future, and breathe without the weight of uncertainty. And the most surprising part, I no longer resented Daniel. For years, I believed forgiveness was impossible. He had abandoned me at my weakest, chasing money and status over his family. But over time, I realized resentment only chained me to the past. Daniel no longer held power over me. One day, I received a text from an unknown number. "Amanda, it's Daniel. Can we meet?" A strange feeling washed over me. It had been years since I'd last heard from him. He had completely vanished after leaving us. I didn't know if he had found happiness or regret, but it didn't matter anymore. I set the phone aside without replying. That afternoon, sitting in my small office, I reviewed designs for my new product line. Thoughts of the past surfaced, but instead of pain, they carried strength. I remembered the despair of the day he walked out, but also the resilience that rebuilt my life. I wasn't that woman anymore. Life grew even busier. Interviews, partnerships, endless orders every day was another step forward. Then, one Sunday morning at the park, I saw him. Daniel stood just a few meters away, watching as my children played. He looked nothing like the confident man who once left me. Time had aged him, his shoulders heavy with regret. When he finally approached, his voice trembled. "I wasn't sure you'd even want to see me." I stayed quiet before finally asking, "Then why are you here?" He glanced at the children, then back at me. "I saw your success in the papers." I realized I was wrong. I wasn't surprised. I had expected this. "You realized that a little too late," I replied calmly. His sad smile faltered. "I know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, not because I expect forgiveness or want to come back, but because I truly regret what I did." I gave him a small nod. "Are you done?" Daniel seemed caught off guard by my steady tone, but I looked him directly in the eyes, free of anger, free of sadness. "Daniel, I've come a long way to be where I am. None of it has anything to do with you anymore." With that, I stood, walked toward my children, and left him standing there alone. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Daniel was no longer the main character of my story. Later, I learned he still lived in the vast Montgomery estate, surrounded by wealth, prestige, and luxury. Yet, despite gaining everything his mother promised him, none of it filled his emptiness. The spotlight faded, and he was left only with silence. Meanwhile, I walked forward with my children's hands in mine, looking back, no regrets. When the applause finally faded, Daniel was left in a silence that felt heavier than any sound. The truth settled over him like a suffocating weight. No one loved him without condition, not the way I once had. Then, in an instant, everything shifted. Sitting in his office, Daniel was startled when my voice drifted out from the large television mounted on the wall. His head snapped up, eyes locking onto the screen. There I was, sitting opposite a well-known talk show host, radiant and composed. "Your story has inspired countless women," the host said warmly. From being abandoned as a single mother to now running a thriving children's fashion brand, you've come so far. Can you tell us a little about that journey? I smiled, a soft confidence lighting my face, the kind of confidence Daniel had never seen in me. At first, I didn't think I could make it, I admitted. But I realized that if I didn't fight for myself, no one else would. My children needed me. I couldn't let the past chain me forever. As I spoke, the screen filled with images of me and my children laughing in a park, playing in outfits I had designed with my own hands. Your brand, Little Blessings, has become a powerful name in the children's fashion industry, the host continued. What's been the greatest lesson for you? The most important thing I've learned, I said with another smile, is to believe in myself. I'm no longer the woman I used to be, no longer fearful, no longer dependent. I've built my happiness on my own. Daniel's chest tightened as he watched. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, as though he couldn't reconcile the woman before him with the one he had once left behind. I was no longer fragile, I was thriving. The segment ended with an image of me holding my children, all three of us glowing with joy. Daniel switched off the television, but the images clung to him, haunting. For years, he had convinced himself he'd done the right thing by leaving, but now, confronted with my happiness without him, he finally saw the truth. He had been devastatingly, irreversibly wrong. He grabbed his keys and bolted from the estate. He didn't know what he would say, or whether I'd even let him through the door. But he couldn't live another day under the weight of regret. By the time he reached my apartment, the sky had fallen into darkness. The life I lived now was far from what it had been when he left. Gone was the cramped, dim space. In its place stood a modern, warm home that reflected the woman I had become. Daniel rang the bell, his heart hammering. When I opened the door, I was still me, but not the same. I was stronger, my eyes no longer carrying sorrow when they met his. What are you doing here? I asked calmly, crossing my arms. I saw you on TV, he stammered, his throat tightened as he pushed the words out. I was wrong, Amanda. I was wrong from the very beginning. I should never have left you. I let my mother dictate my choices, and in doing so, I lost everything. I tilted my head, expression unreadable. And only now you realize that. His eyes glistened. I know it's too late. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for a second chance. But you need to know you were the only person I ever truly loved. I studied him for a long moment before speaking softly. Daniel, I don't need to hear that anymore. He froze. What? I smiled, not with gentleness, but with liberation. Whether you loved me or not doesn't matter. I've moved on. I've built a life I'm proud of, and you're no longer part of it. The truth struck him harder than any blow. He had chosen his path long ago, and so had I. I was happy now, free from the shadow of the past. Take care of yourself, Daniel, I said quietly, before closing the door. He stood there for a long time, staring at the wood between us, knowing there was no undoing what he had done. The urge to knock again pulsed through him, but deep down, he understood it was over. He had lost me. He had lost everything. That night, Daniel returned to the Montgomery estate, a palace of wealth that suddenly felt like a prison. His mother, Margaret, sat with her wine, unshaken by his turmoil. Their conversation cut deep, his regrets against her justifications, his emptiness against her pride. And for the first time, Daniel defied her. I'm leaving, he declared, finally severing the chains of his inheritance. Margaret's voice trembled with fury, but it no longer held power over him. He walked out of the mansion without looking back, stepping away from the world he once believed to find him, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight lift. He felt free. Meanwhile, my mornings were filled with warmth, the sound of my children's laughter, the aroma of coffee, the hum of a business I had built from nothing. Little Blessings had grown from a small online store into a nationally recognized brand. With flagship stores in New York and Los Angeles, I was busier than ever, yet every task carried joy because it was mine. I no longer needed Daniel's validation. My story wasn't about him anymore. That afternoon, at the park, a woman recognized me. You're Amanda, the founder of Little Blessings, she said with a smile. Your story is so inspiring. You've shown women everywhere that pain doesn't define us. We can rebuild, rise, and succeed. Her words filled me with quiet pride. I had never set out to be an example, but somewhere along the way, my resilience became bigger than me. That evening, I cuddled my children and told them a story not of fairy tale royalty, but of a woman who carved her own happiness. Did she live happily? Mommy, my daughter asked, wide-eyed. Double quotes. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered, kissing her forehead. She made her own happiness. And as I stood in the doorway watching them sleep, I finally understood. My life, my joy, my future, they were mine alone. This wasn't a story about revenge or regret. It was about transformation, resilience, and reclaiming what had once been lost. I was no longer waiting to be saved. I had saved myself.